And step 0. Set a clear goal. Do you want to become freakishly strong? Have marathon-level endurance? Perhaps a fighter's agility and explosiveness? What you want to train for can heavily influence a given training cycle. For this guide, I will be solely focusing on muscle growth and hypertrophy because it is the most popular goal and has the most carry over to other domains of fitness. Step 1. Pick a split. Which split is the best one? They all work, as long as workload and recovery are managed. 3 rest days a week are a safe rule of thumb, but the one you should choose depends on your circumstances and personal preference. Here are some popular splits that are easy to program. Full body, 2x a week has best balance between exercise and recovery. The 5 rest days a week can make sure you are at the top of your game every workout. And you only need to work out 2 days of the week in exchange for longer workouts. It can be initially hard because training everything in a session is tiring, but the body will easily adapt and it won't be a problem anymore. Pull-push legs, 3x a week pulling muscles, pushing muscles, and legs on separate days. Days can be ordered in any way as long as they are separated by a rest day. A push-pull legs session is shorter than a full body session, but leg day can be relatively longer than push or pull day because there are 2 days for the upper body and only 1 for the lower body. But recovery is much more manageable than the 6x a week variant, which is extremely hard to recover from unless workload is spread out meticulously to accommodate the extra days or you are on steroids. This split is for those who want to focus on pushing muscles, pulling muscles, and legs separately. Upper-lower, 4x a week. Time needed to complete each session is more consistent because now there are 2 lower body days in the week. Because upper body days contain both pushing and pulling movements, it is more possible to do what's called a superset by doing a pushing set followed by a pulling set. Immediately, letting the pushing muscles rest as the pulling muscles are active. This saves time but can be fatiguing if your cardiovascular endurance can't keep up, but you can eventually build up enough endurance to be able to handle it. And with only 3 rest days a week, you can be sitting at the edge of recovery if you are not careful. And of course, you can modify the split however you like as long as rest days are kept in mind. For example, you can add extra rest days for a full body split or an upper-lower split. Or add extra workload in a push-pull legs split. These modified asynchronous splits can work if you want either more recovery or more volume. Step 2. Exercise selection. In front of you is visual of what kind of movement you need to develop each body part. You only need one exercise for each movement pattern. It is of utmost importance that no muscle is neglected. Your finger extensors are as important as your finger flexors and gripping muscles. Here are the exercises you can pick from for each movement to fully develop each muscle. Chest. For horizontal presses. The Larsen press makes it so that all the work is done by the upper body by taking the leg drive out of the equation, making it ideal for chest activation. While the ring push-up, which is harder than a normal push-up, has extra instability forces the body to work harder to stabilize, making the chest work overtime. And can be progressed with either harder variations or more weight. The normal bench press can work too if strength is a side goal. So can a machine variation if your anatomy is compatible with the machine's pressing path. But the machine bench press less than ideal because the extra stability can weaken your natural stabilizers. You might need an incline press would develop the upper chest if it's smaller compared to the lower chest. Nevertheless, horizontal pressing works both the upper and lower chest equally. Without any equipment, normal push-ups can take you far, especially if you progress through its variations. Dips. Ring dips are harder than normal dips because of the instability like with the ring push-up, but both can get the job done. Without equipment, you can either make a setup of your own or skip completely if you have no choice. Adding a chest fly is recommended if you want to make sure your chest grows. However, it is not mandatory as horizontal pressing and dips already develop the chest greatly. Add a chest fly variation if you want to maximize chest growth. Provided that you have great form during your presses, you will have no problem developing the serratus anterior. But isolating it is possible if you want to target it specifically by doing what is called a push-up plus, which only uses the shoulder blades or scapula. Arms. The normal bicep curl is the single exercise you need because it can effectively target both the long and short head in one go as long as it's done with proper intensity. That way, you don't need to risk a bicep tear from preacher curls or do many curling variations that waste your time. But if you insist on biasing the long and short head separately, pick a variation for the long head and a variation for the short head. Hammer curls target the brachialis, which is a deeper muscle under the biceps. But any bicep curling variation will uses the brachialis and brachioradialis as secondary muscles and will contribute to some development. Without any equipment, the leg bicep curl is your only option. For the triceps, horizontal and vertical pressing already stimulates the lateral and medial head of the tricep, so we only need a variation to stimulate the long head. The Sphinx push-up is also an amazing choice when equipment isn't available. Any of these exercises here will work all three heads including the long head. Pick one and move on. For the forearms, the one-arm carry is the most efficient when it comes to directly working other muscles along with the forearms. Upper traps work hard to keep your shoulder in place, and with the weight on only one side, your obliques stay active to stabilize your body, which is something the double arm carry can't provide. Two-arm carries are more efficient overall to tire both hands in one go, if you are willing to give up the antilateral flexion component which would work your obliques. Hanging from a pull-up bar is also a viable option, and progressing into false grip hangs will challenge your forearms even more. Without any equipment, you can grab the nearest solid object and squeeze it as hard as possible. For the wrist flexors, do the wrist curl. And for the wrist extensors, the reverse wrist curl. Gripping exercises do indeed work both the wrist flexors and extensors, but not through their full range. That means if wrist curls are neglected, your wrists are at risk of getting injured out of their neutral position. Without any equipment, you can still do wrist curls and reverse wrist curls in a push-up position. For the finger extensors, using specialized equipment is the most reliable method to develop them. But without any equipment at all, you can try finger planks where you try to spread and dig and extend your fingers into the ground. You can also try applying tension yourself on your fingers. The shoulders are made up of the three deltoids, anterior deltoid, lateral deltoid, and rear deltoid, and the rotator cuff group. However, I will treat the rear deltoid as part of the upper back. For the anterior deltoid, any overhead pressing movement will suffice. The difference between a barbell overhead press and a dumbbell shoulder press is that dumbbells offer more instability, which works and develops your stabilizers more. Without equipment, progressing through the pike push-up and its harder variations can get the job done as well. For the lateral deltoid, any lateral raise will work. A lateral raise done with dumbbells can be as effective as a lateral raise done with cables provided that it is done with intensity. Without equipment, you can still work the lateral deltoid. Link on how to perform this exercise is in the description. Now under the three deltoids, there's the rotator cuff group that is made up of four muscles: supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis. Neglecting these muscles invites shoulder tears. You can isolate each muscle with these exercises. You can also develop the subscapularis, teres minor, and infraspinatus in one go with steel club training. This exercise also develops the deviators of the wrist, along with the pronatus or supinators. Steel club training is efficient when it comes to targeting many stabilizers in one movement. This is also an effective movement for the brachioradialis and your grip strength. The main exercise with the steel club is the 360, which is also called a shield cast, which is all you will need for the stabilizers, but you may include other steel club exercises such as mills if you wish to do so. You can use a steel club, steel make, mace bell, or any adjustable barbell or dumbbell with light weight on one side. Another alternative is using a rice or sand bucket, which can train the same forearm and hand muscles that steel club hits, but it also hits the finger extensors as well. Without any equipment, you can develop the deviators using your body weight as resistance and rocking your fist back and forth. For the pronatus and supinators, you can use a long object and use its torque as resistance. Applying tension yourself would be your last resort. Shrugs done with either barbell, trap bar, or dumbbells can be enough. Without any equipment, you could perform shrugs in a pike push-up position, or even a wall-supported handstand position. For the rectus abdominis, you need a crunch and leg raise movement pattern. The up wheel or the long lever plank can serve as an alternative to crunches as well, since the leg raise already hits the spinal flexion movement pattern of the rectus abdominis. The cable crunch, along with the captain's chair knee or leg raises, is a viable combination. The leg raise can also be done on a pull-up bar and a dip bar. Replacing cable crunches with the up wheel can also work. The up wheel is unique in which it works anti-spinal extension dynamically, in which the body resists collapsing while moving. Anti-extension worked statically can be seen in the long lever plank. The core's more functional role is to resist movement, and you should do both anti-extension and spinal flexion for a robust core. A bodyweight substitute to the up wheel is the ring rollout. Under the rectus abdominis lies the transverse abdominis. If you brace your core all on all exercises, which you should be doing as it is part of the exercise technique unless external stability is integrated into the lift, the transverse abdominis will be developed. You can also isolate this muscle with stomach vacuums if you desire. Rotation, lateral spinal flexion, along with anti-rotation and anti-lateral flexion are the role of the obliques. If you are doing one-arm carries, you are already targeting anti-lateral flexion. Combine that with dynamic movements such as the 45-degree oblique crunch or the side bend that can be done with a single dumbbell or cable. For rotation, the wood chopper suffices. You can add an anti-rotational component to the wood chopper by doing what's called a pull-off press in the middle of the movement. That way, you can target rotation and anti-rotation in one go. Weighted Russian twists are an alternative for rotational strength. For the Erector Spinae, its job is spinal extension, and anti-spinal flexion, the reverse hyperextension, is your best option when it comes to spinal extension strength. If you have the means to do this exercise, do it. Anti-spinal flexion will be addressed once I get to the leg exercises. Without any equipment, you have shoulder taps, which is a plank where you move a hand to touch the opposite shoulder. The plank component makes it an anti-extension exercise, while the shoulder tap also makes it an anti-rotation exercise. You can make it harder by having your arms out forward similar to a long lever plank, or work the obliques more by slowing the touches to keep your hand in the air for a longer period of time. Include body weight crunches and leg raises on the floor to develop the rectus abdominis further. Since leg raises on the floor have less tension at the top position, supplementing it with body weight crunches is much more sensible to make sure the abs are developed. For rotation, body weight Russian twists, plank thread throughs, which also work antilateral flexion because of the moment you stay in a side plank, or even momentum-resisted rotation such as throwing right and left hooks violently can work. For lateral flexion, do side crunches. For the Erector Spinae, you can either rig a setup for the reverse hyperextension or perform back extensions on the floor. For back extensions, you can hold a weight with your outstretched arms to make the movement harder. Not much weight is needed because the outstretched arm can give your body the torque it needs to be challenged. For the back, which is split into the upper back and lats, pull-ups and rows can contribute to most of the development. Do your pulls in neutral grip to target the brachialis. The lat pull down can also be used, but pull-ups are superior because the body is more involved in the movement to stabilize you. An isolation movement is also needed for the upper back to make sure it grows. The wide grip overhand row, reverse pec deck, or the band pull apart can all develop your upper back. And if you have access to a chest expander, you have the option to use it for pull aparts or the back press. Without any equipment at all, you can rig a setup for bodyweight rows, which is your best bet for both the upper back and lats. In the event you are unable to make a setup for rows, the human pullover is your last resort for the development of the lat muscles. Combine that with the widow row, and you will have targeted both the lats and the upper back separately. Moving on to the lower body, the hip flexors will be strengthened and developed if you include knee or leg raises into your plan. Otherwise, you can isolate it with pure hip flexion with either cable-resisted hip flexion or seated single leg lift-offs if equipment isn't available. For the quads, we need a squat or a lunge movement pattern and a leg extension movement pattern. The Bulgarian split squat hits your quads and to an extent, the glutes and the hip extension muscles of the hamstring. And combined with the leg extension machine can be all you need. Weighted walking lunges are also an alternative to Bulgarian split squats. The barbell squat will only ever be worth your time if you have the necessary ankle mobility and anatomy to get into a deep squat. Squatting without sufficient ankle mobility or with an anatomy that favors wide stances will only turn it into a half hinge. It is also easier to get injured from barbell squats due to the heavier loads. Only include it if you can deep squat while keeping your back flat. Without equipment, you have body weight walking lunges, or you can stay stationary with alternating reverse lunges. For a leg extension, you can do the sissy squat, which is a standing leg extension. Another alternative would be the reverse Nordic curl. Be careful with the sissy squat and reverse Nordic curl, and make sure you go through their easier progressions to not get injured. The difference between a hinge and a hip thrust is that a hinge movement pattern works the glutes and the hip extension muscles of the hamstring at the most stretched position, while a hip thrust works those muscles at their most shortened and contracted position. Romanian deadlifts done with a barbell or dumbbell with a single leg will get the job done. You can also use a staggered or a B stance to be able to perform single leg Romanian deadlifts without the balance aspect. For hamstrings knee flexion function, train it with seated leg curls as it trains the hamstrings at a more lengthened position than the lying leg curl. A more powerful option is the Nordic curl. Progressing through the Nordic curl will give you stronger and more resilient hamstrings and knees. Without any equipment, you have the glute bridge and its single leg variation. And the bodyweight single leg Romanian deadlift can be your hinge movement. You can keep tension on your muscles by holding the bottom position of the Romanian deadlift. You can try to rig a setup for the Nordic curl. If you can't do the Nordic curl, you can do the sliding hamstring curl on the ground. If the ground isn't cooperative and you can't slide your legs to curl them, the glute walkouts are a last resort when it comes to knee flexion strength. The calf is made up of two muscles, the gastrocnemius and the soleus. It was believed that straight-legged calf raises target the gastrocnemius while the seated calf raise machine targets the soleus. But this study shows that straight-legged calf raises work both the gastrocnemius and the soleus, which means the straight-legged calf raise is the only calf exercise you need. Without weights, you can do them with just your body weight. You can also try it with a single leg. The tibialis anterior is the muscle that performs the function that is opposite to the calves. Tibialis raises are usually done with just the body weight, but you can load it with cable attachments or specialized equipment such as TIB bars. Now even after all of that, there are still all of these muscles on screen that haven't been hit. Now, you have the option to do over 10 isolation exercises to target them one by one if these muscles are currently underdeveloped in your body. But if you are currently healthy, there are two movements that hits them all. Single leg body weight Romanian deadlift bottom position hold. But this time you are not doing it to work the hinge pattern. The balance aspect of this exercise is what fires up all of these stabilizers to keep you from falling. Maintain alignment and perfect form at all times to get the most out of these exercises. If you are unable to balance with perfect form, you may use a wall to assist yourself until you are able to balance by yourself. If you want to know more, link to a video that offers a more detailed explanation in the description. The second movement is walking lateral lunges. The abductors, adductors, hip rotators, and ankle stabilizers are most active in side to side. Step 3. Integration. You picked your split and you picked your exercises. Now fit your exercises into your split. For example, this is the list of exercises you are going to be doing if you have access to all kinds of equipment. For a full body 2x a week program, it would look like this. Horizontal and vertical movement patterns are done on different days. Some isolations like the bicep curls and cross-cable tricep extensions are repeated to further focus on their growth. You can have the exercises on only one of these days if you want the workout to be shorter. In a 3x a week push-pull legs, all pushing, pulling, and leg movements are all separated. Making it a push legs pull split can also give you the option to do some forearms on push day and give you enough rest until pull day arrives for the forearms to work again, but since every workout session is separated by one rest day, it shouldn't be a problem anyways. For core, you can either spread the exercises over the 3 days, put it all into pull day, or you can add a day dedicated to the core. This is an example of what a 4x a week split would look like. Core exercises can be spread between 2 leg days, or all core exercises can be added to both lower body days. If you just have the ground and gravity, and are unable to find a setup for some exercises, this would be the list of exercises you will do. Your best option would be the upper-lower 4x times a week, as it hits every muscle twice a week. You may turn it into a push-pull legs split if you'd like shorter sessions as well. With just your body weight, you can combine walking lunges with lateral lunges and be able to move forwards and backwards and side to side to hit your leg muscles from all angles. I advise placing your core exercises in your lower body day after you are done with the leg exercises. And of course, you can combine the exercises you can do with equipment are usually better than the ones without equipment. If you are able to get gymnastic rings and hang them, do it. Gymnastic rings can hit the entire upper body, and there are a few exercises for the legs as well. Without gymnastic rings, you can still opt for an adjustable barbell. Even one that goes up to 30 kilograms can give you access to most exercises, not to mention having plates on one side can turn it into a steel club. Resistance bands are also an option, and their value skyrockets if you have a very stable anchor point. If you can attach it to an immovable object, you can easily do cable exercises such as rows. Step 4. Sets, reps, and progressive overload. 10 to 20 sets per muscle per week is advice for those who waste their time with more sets of worse quality. 3 to 10 intense sets per muscle per week is the range for natural lifters to grow muscle. On the lower end if your sets were really intense. And on the higher end if your sets were less intense. What makes a set intense? How close you were to failure on that set. Failure is when you cannot perform another repetition. Failure is not when you stop because of the burn or pump, but it's when you can't physically do another repetition. Reps in reserve means how many repetitions you were away from failure. 2 really hard sets can count as 4 sets that left to reps in serve. Now, does that mean you can save time by doing 1 set for a given exercise? Yes, but with caveats. This style of training is called high-intensity training. It has been done before by Mike Mentzer. He called it heavy-duty training. But it's not like he entered the gym and did 1 set of everything, call it a day. The kind of failure he reached wasn't normal. He went above and beyond with intensification techniques such as forced reps, negatives, and rest pauses. And to prepare his body for such intense working sets, he included proper warm-up sets prior to the singular intense set. If you are a beginner, you should avoid intensification techniques and training to failure altogether, as it is dangerous considering that proper technique is not second nature to you yet. Train with 1 to 3 reps in reserve with 2 or 3 sets if needed, and after 2 or 3 months. You may begin training with high intensity once you perfect your technique. With equipment, train in the 5 to 12 rep range. The best way to apply progressive overload is with the double progression model, which relies on staying with the weight until you are able to do more total reps, and once you cross the higher end, you may increase the weight. Without any equipment, where your walking lunges sets are ridiculously long, you have the option of focusing on getting close or to failure. As long as a set is intense, it will induce muscle growth. Exercises like the push-up, which has known harder variations, can be tracked and progressed like with weights. Step 5. Staying injury-free. Warm up with a dynamic stretching routine. Here's an example of a dynamic stretching routine on screen. And do static stretch after your workouts or on your rest days. On rest days, warm up with dynamic stretches before doing static stretching, or you risk stretching cold muscles and getting injured. Here's a static stretching routine on the screen. Stretching is not like muscle building exercises. Going to failure on muscle building exercises will grow your muscles. Going to failure on stretching will tear your muscles and tendons. Get proper sleep so your body recovers and builds its muscle. Stay hydrated. After exercising for a while, if your strength numbers have stalled and your joints hurt, and if you want to quit exercising altogether, take 1 or 2 week break from exercising. This long period of rest will give your body the chance to recover everything, and when you are starting to work out again, start slow and give your body the chance to adapt to exercise demands again. Do cardio. But separate cardio and hypertrophy by 24 hours at least. And don't do too much cardio, or else it will put too much strain on your recovery and disrupt your muscle growth. Low intensity cardio 2 to 3 times a week is the best choice, but you may add in high intensity cardio once a week maximum. That is all. The only fitness content worth watching after this are videos on proper form and videos of easier or harder progression of exercises. Now stop watching and start training.